everyone. Hi, Vanessa. Thank you. Thank you to our speakers as well, Lois and Janice. It's really exciting to have two community leaders from around the county to join us tonight. I just want to welcome everyone and say that this topic is exceptionally near and dear to my heart. I got into city planning because I believed that creating community was, a very exciting endeavor. It merged the political, the social, the environmental, and the economical facets of really creating community and looking at sustainability through different lenses, and realizing that to truly build community, you have to balance everything. And so this is a great topic. We've got some really interesting topics to cover, and yeah, I'm just going to kick it off and hand it over to Janice. We've got a couple of slides, but really we're hoping to blaze through some slides to really just set the tone for hopefully a good spirited conversation that engages you all.
Great, thank you, Brian. So yeah, I'm gonna, again, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Vanessa Luna Shannon, part of the Brian Barnacle election team. I'm gonna start by introducing our guest speakers for tonight. First, we have Lois Fisher. Lois is the president of Fisher Town Design and an urban designer. Her firm specializes in designing and zoning for walkable downtowns and neighborhoods as an alternative to suburban sprawl. I hope that you would agree that the Her Theater District project in downtown Petaluma is a very successful example of urban design. She completed a walkable design and code for a new downtown in Roner Park. She's an adjunct faculty member at Sonoma State University and teaches upper division urban design and healthy community classes there. Lois has served for 13 years on the Planning Commission for Windsor, helping to spearhead the development of that downtown, which is centered on a town green. And she has been a volunteer mentor with Big Brothers Big Sisters for over 10 years. Our next guest speaker is Janice Watkins. Janice grew up in Sonoma County, where her father was a farm advisor. She's a fellow SRJC alum, and after graduating from SRJC, she went on to higher education and UCLA Law School. She returned home and has been a practicing attorney for over 4 decades. She finds her passion working on environmental issues and social and environmental justice in Healdsburg and Sonoma County. Janice is also a board member of the Sonoma County Conservation Action, founded by fellow Petaluman Bill Cordum. And she's also on the board of the North Bay Organizing Project, or NBOP, which we all know is highly active in our community effort to advance equity and climate justice. So these are our dynamic featured speakers that we're all gonna be having the opportunity and the privilege to hear from. But first, again, I'm gonna turn it back over to Brian so that he can kind of set the stage for this conversation we're gonna have tonight.
Yep, thank you, Vanessa. Let me get my slides up here. All right. Someone give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen here. Great, okay. So tonight we're gonna go through a couple of topics. First, we're gonna talk about housing in Sonoma County. That's gonna be Janice. Then we'll talk about walkable communities and really the features and benefits of walkable communities. And from there, I'll just review, my view of where Petaluma is at from a development standpoint, and then we'll have a discussion between ourselves and with you all to look at what the future might hold for us. All right, Janice, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I first want to say I'm honored to be asked to comment on the housing situation in Sonoma County. I'm not an expert, but I come at this with a sense of environmental passion and the need for justice. So what the pandemic has revealed, I think, is how crucial it is to have safe and stable housing. We want everyone in our community to have dignity and appropriate housing. Now, how do we get there? At this moment, new ideas are emerging and a sense of justice. And I think this is the time and the opportunity to start planning and carrying out with new ideas and with a sense of purpose to really address this problem. So the first slide, which Brian will bring up, is a visual summary of the affordability problem we have. So you can see that the median asking rent is almost $2,300 a month. So many of, as you can see in the list of workers and salaries, many vital or valued workers, for example, preschool teachers and farm workers, can't begin to afford to live here. And the slide, as it summarizes, says that renters need to earn 3.7 times the minimum wage to afford asking rent in Sonoma County. So you can see the problem. Our lower income workers and families have to double up and triple up, and they must live in substandard and unsafe conditions. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah, okay. So what's the scope of our problem? And this is addressing the very low and the extremely low income renters in our community, of which there are many. So Sonoma County overall needs almost over 16,000 more affordable rental homes. And that means that Petaluma's share, based upon population, would amount to a housing shortfall of over 2,000 units. Petaluma can address this housing need. It just needs to do so intelligently. And I think Brian pretty surely agrees that Petaluma's general plan update is a great opportunity to address this problem and do long-term planning and find solutions. Next slide, please.
He's got a lot of people on the call. I'll send you.
Next slide, please. Oh yeah, okay, here we are. Okay, so what's the problem? Why did we end up in this state of affairs? Well, it's largely monies that we no longer have in proportion to our population. We have lost redevelopment funds, we've lost state funding, and we lost some of our federal HUD monies. So we have a big shortfall. So this cannot be solved in one discussion, and it can't be solved in a matter of 1 or 2 years. But let's move on to the next slide. The answer is us. We need to bring fresh ideas to the table. So I'm going to let some who are more expert than I am in this address some of the specifics, but I'd like to throw out a couple of ideas about things that could or should be done better. And one idea is that during the general plan update, we inventory all city-owned parcels and rate them for winning affordable housing financing, because it's a race to get the money. Are you the best prepared, and are you technically equipped to handle this this task of winning the money? Another complementary idea is that we acquire the services of an expert nonprofit consultant that can advise on affordable housing financing and or uplift the knowledge of our current planning staff on this subject. Another idea is to proactively zone property for affordable housing and middle income housing and perhaps during the general plan update, consider a greater use of specific plants so that we have the land set aside. And finally, just one last thing, use a nonprofit housing land trust for creating or preserving rent-restricted affordable housing. Petaluma has already employed this model, this nonprofit model, for creating affordable home ownership. Let's move it on to the next level and do that for rental housing, which is of such a great need. So that's my piece, and I'll turn it back to our moderator.
Thank you, Janice, so much for that. There was a lot of rich information there that I think we're going to be able to come back to unpack some of that too during our question and answer period. So just a reminder for everybody who's here in the Zoom room with us, please don't hesitate. You're welcome to use the chat feature to post your question now for later on in the program when we get to the question and answer period. So you can do that at any time throughout this event. So Lois, how do we grow responsibly? Talk to us about that.
Well, responsible growth, you guys have a really nationally known example, which is the theater district. And what responsible growth does is it pays for itself first. Then it actually makes it so people can enjoy walking. So maybe they can get rid of a car or two. And then so of course that means it's less greenhouse gases, because no matter how many electric cars we buy, we still have traffic, right? The real answer is to get people out of their cars. So then this has a health impact too. You can actually, you're healthier when you walk. Even if you walk up, like in New York, if you walk up a flight of 3 steps a day, you can lose 16 pounds a year. I mean, it's amazing how fast it works. So if you could just put it into your daily life, it's very impactful. Yeah, so here's a picture of what responsible growth looks like. Walkable, healthy, equitable, generates taxes and climate friendly. So on the left, you can see a picture of the theater district area before the smart code was put in, which actually required walkable. You guys did it. You required walkable features, which are, you can see a certain minimum height, and then frontages, which means right behind the sidewalk. It's all very friendly. It's all very inclusive and encouraging for people to walk. So next slide. This is a picture, just a very straightforward before and after. You can see the trees are in the same spot in both of these pictures. So it's normally more animated downtown, but you can see right here the tremendous difference in how much you want to walk in the slide on the left versus how much you want to walk in the slide on the right. And that's just done by zoning, folks. Zoning can be very powerful. Next. So this is a very interesting question, Deer Creek versus Theater Square. And why it's interesting is I was involved to a degree in both of them. Theater Square came out of the code, which is for 400 acres in Petaluma. And both Theater Square and Deer Creek were designed for zoned for mixed use. And one came out looking like the left, and the other one came out looking to the right. And what is fascinating is that there was a push to do the design on the left in order to create more income for the town to pay for police and fire and all kinds of needed maintenance money. But anyway, on the right, you can see what the difference is. On the left is lots of emissions. Everyone's driving. And on the right, you can see there's less emissions because people are walking, better health, more tax revenue per acre. And when you actually create more walkable space in the center of town, it reduces pressure on the urban growth boundary. It's also safer. On the left, you can see there's nobody at night. There's no one really watching out for the area. But at night in Theater Square and downtown Petaluma, there are all kinds of people out and about walking. Next. So which development returned more taxes? This is very interesting. So this is about, I think it's about 5 years old, this tax right here. But so Deer Creek Village, you can see the size, the total acres is 34 acres. And you can see the amount of taxes they pay each year. So it's basically $14,000 per acre is what the town gets from that. And then Theater Square, in terms of acres, it's only 1.28, so much tinier. But look at the return in dollars per acre. So yeah, I actually just did the math, and if all of Deer Creek had been developed like Theater Square, Petaluma would be getting 5.3 million a year more income. So that income can go for police, fire, parks, etc. So there's no reason not to do this kind of design. Next. So anyway, there was a study done, and this is a picture of Santa Rosa, and it shows where the most return on investment is. This is like, if you have a certain amount of money you're going to put into sewer, water, electricity, internet, it's like you want to make sure that what you're actually approving is going to actually pay those bills of maintaining it. So you can see actually, and this is downtown Santa Rosa, it offers the most return on the investment. So if you're going to be thinking about growing and you're going to be doing a general plan update, seems to be a lot of reason to go ahead and use your model of the theater district smart code in Petaluma. It will pay off financially. Next. So it's basically a win-win. Walkable mixed-use infill. So basically anywhere where you have a large parking lot that's no longer needed, or you have a vacant piece of land, you can actually do what you can see here. On the top is the before picture, on the bottom is it's after it's been infilled. And it just really you can fill in a lot of missing pieces. And even on the east side, you know, McDowell Boulevard, it can be actually infilled to actually create a wonderful walkable boulevard. So people on the east also have the access to walkability. So to get this though, you can't just start with a general plan consultant. They don't actually have much in terms of a design background. So I would highly recommend that you do some visioning. And before the theater district was, smart code was made up for the whole smart code area, there actually was a visioning plan. And it was very clear, it wanted to have a walkable environment, pictures of the river with all kinds of beautiful urban buildings surrounding it. So we actually need to do that step before we step into the general plan. That'll be my high recommendation for Petaluma. And I think people are already working on that. So keep going in that direction. You should be fine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lois. Thank you so much. So now I'm going to give a snapshot of where development's at in Petaluma, looking at a couple of different policies, looking at you know, and how we're doing, where development's happening around the city and what it might mean for us looking toward the future with our general plan update, infrastructure, things like that. So first, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our urban growth boundary. We first adopted it in 1998 and it expires in 2025. And so for me, jumping into being on the council, I would certainly advocate that we get the urban growth boundary back on the ballot. Let the voters decide. I would advocate that we not expand it so that we can focus on infill, because as Lois showed, and as we'll see in slides coming up, it's really just a much better investment for our city to not be building new infrastructure. We already can't maintain the roads we have. We should be really focusing on you know, using the infrastructure we have to its fullest degree. As a business person, I wouldn't move into a new building if I was only occupying half of the first one. So it's really about making sure that you use your investment wisely. So how are we doing on housing? Janice talked about, you know, gave a look at what the county's doing. Petaluma is a microcosm of what's going on in the county and really what's going on in the state. I don't have any magic bullet for what's going on or for how to solve our housing problems. But I do know that we've had redevelopment agencies gone since 2011 and we need new solutions. So it's really, one of the things that has jumped out to me, I don't know, about 8 months ago, 10 months ago now, was that we have a $1 per unit impact fee strategy or formula. And that basically incentivizes developers to build fewer and larger homes so that they can maximize profit. And if we shift that to a $1 per square foot model, we immediately change the profit model for developers to where they're building smaller and more units. So that's just one example of how I think we can, with a small policy shift, we can be encouraging, instead of 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,600 square foot units, we can be encouraging 800 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath units. And that size and those amenities really do go a long way towards driving affordability. And then finally, I was shocked when I looked at the city's budget this year and recognized that we had a severe housing crunch in our affordable housing area, not so much in market rate, as you can see. But we only have 1 FTE in our housing department. And so towards what Janice said about going after the state money, it's really hard to go after the state money and to work with developers proactively to go after that money if we don't have staff. And so it's, you know, our city is overstretched. I sure hope that our 1% sales tax passes so that we can staff up in these departments and start to make headway on some of these real challenges that we have. I don't know why I went that way. All right. So how are we doing on infrastructure? What we're looking at here is either by area of our city, are we is it costing us money or is it making us money? And as you can see, the areas that are more densely populated in our downtown are the ones that are making us money on this is property tax per acre. So again, a lot of times they say, well, this is going to make us more money on a revenue basis, but we never look at the costs. And that's, as a business person, it just doesn't make sense to me to not be thinking about what our efficiency metrics are and what our, you know, if I only look at revenue without looking at costs, essentially. And so for me, responsible development is when you can actually afford it. It's, and, you know, as a result of growth for growth's sake, we're looking at $180 million in deferred maintenance. Those are roads. Our fire stations need to be upgraded. We need to overhaul our air quality systems and our HVAC systems in some of our buildings, especially in lieu of COVID. We need to be focused on indoor air quality. So we got some serious expenses. Our city tax, I think they allocated about $2 million a year towards roads. So we're looking at about, you know, just maybe a little over 1% of our deferred maintenance per year. We're going to need innovative and creative solutions to address this, because, you know, that's 100 years away before we just deal with our current deferred maintenance. And then finally, I love this map. I love the city actually on their new website that they map all of where the projects are going. This is just a screen capture from our planning website, really a great resource. I added the purple on there myself for projects that I'm aware of that are coming into the pipeline that I didn't see represented on the website. And then I added the second smart station up here because that's a serious project that's going to be kicking off. And for me, you know, recognizing that I worked on the SMART campaign in 2008, and it's a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think that anyone who was working on that campaign was excited about trains as much as they were excited about transforming land use toward walkable communities, toward vibrant local economies, and preserving our green fields and our farms from sprawl. And so when I think about the fact that we're getting our second train station over here, we should absolutely be looking at what other infrastructure needs to get upgraded over there, whether it's the Corona overcrossing. McDowell Boulevard certainly needs to have sidewalks going up it towards Lagunitas and our major businesses there. That's a major revenue opportunity to actually have, you know, people be able to come to our community, go to our local breweries and our distilleries up there and spend money. Same with Corona overcrossing. There's no bike lane that goes over there, and we know that that's an unsafe area. The second area that to me jumps out is down here in the south end of town, where we are, you know, there's development going in along the riverfront. We've got about 500 units of residential development, another 100,000 plus square feet of commercial that's going in along the riverfront with the Amy's project. And all of that is going to be pouring onto Lakeville and heading down here. And so I know we've been talking about Rainier Crossing forever, and that we still aren't going to have the money to do it. Not if I got elected, we wouldn't have the money for, during my term. But I do think that we can get the money to build a Caulfield connector right here. And with this development that's going on out here, the big development that's going on right along the riverfront right here, we could provide meaningful traffic relief to Lakeville, which is going to flow down to Washington and D Street. So when I think about what we're looking at and where we're growing right now, the idea of a Rainier connector just doesn't make sense, given that, we're already putting a lot of more development down here at the south end of town. We're investing in a train station right up here. I mean, the city council gave the developer $2 million from our traffic mitigation fees to buy land, and so that we got our train station. So if we're going to do that, let's do it. Let's do it right and make that a center, and stop holding up money for Rainier when we should be building the crossing at Corona and the crossing down here at Caulfield. So with that, I think we're doing pretty good on time, but my next question, where do we go from here?
So some really compelling information there. And so I have a couple of questions for our guest speakers before we turn it all to you. And again, as a reminder for those of us that are just joining us, please feel free at any time to go ahead and use the chat feature, the chat icon on the bottom bar, to submit or post your question. And we're going to turn it over to y'all in just a few minutes here. But before we do, in fact, Lois, I'm going to go to you first, because I know you have to head out to do the important work of teaching a class at SSU tonight.
Yes.
So we're so thankful to have you here for as much as we can have you. So why don't we go to you first? You talked about walkability and the importance about walkable neighborhoods. Can you say a little bit more about that? You referenced the Deer Park. Maybe kind of expand on the learning lessons about that for those that are just joining us, as well as maybe the SMART code and how that factors in.
Okay. Well, basically, planners have the power to actually change what comes out of the planning system. And right now, most of California, most of Petaluma, probably Petaluma is like 80% of what you've got zoned is zoned for sprawl, believe it or not. So it actually takes kind of like an act of Congress, like you did with the SMART code, to actually change those metrics. And we actually did it in Windsor as well. Windsor, when I moved here, had no town center. We actually had our Christmas parade in the Rayleigh Shopping Center. You can imagine doing that. So it was huge to get a civic place like the Town Green. So and then I think I might have mentioned it previously, but I'm working on a plan to turn the a Railroad Square Depot into instead of a parking lot, have a plaza there. So these are ways which we can use planning to actually make people's lives so much better in terms of thinking about larger sidewalks and sidewalk dining in times of COVID. And another thing that's really important in times of all these disasters we've been having is what's called community cohesion. And it means, like, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but people didn't used to let their girls walk on the sidewalks in Petaluma until after the SMART code and the theater district was built. And all of a sudden it was like people felt safe, right? There are certain things that planners know, if you do them, people will feel safe. And so anyway, it's not rocket science, it's actually just very basic, but you need to actually make a decision that you're going to apply these principles in certain areas, or they will automatically not be that way. I'm just telling you, the default is to sprawl. So you have to be proactive if you want more of these wonderful places.
I'm going to go ahead and ask Janice here, what do you see as the most kind of up and coming, the near-term opportunities for Petaluma to promote responsible development? I think you mentioned some. I don't know if you, are you there with us?
There
you are,
well, I think having obviously community involvement, that's the number one thing, to have that vision that Brian and visioning done that Brian and Lois were talking about. And then combining the community input with the expertise. So that would involve investing in good advice. However you do that with permanent staff or with consultant staff. So you make your plan and then you have to implement it. So you have to have this ability to do the bricks and mortar building and implement your vision. So I would say community plus expertise, including Lois's ideas of expertise.
Thank you. And Brian, I think the general plan has been mentioned here tonight. I mean, I think you're probably hearing about it many times throughout the day. I think it's on the top of our minds as informed voters. So can you say more about what your priorities would be around the general plan update in regard to addressing our affordable housing shortage specifically, which is another really big, important topic and challenge for Petaluma?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my priorities would be to remove the exclusionary zoning practices that we've spent years propagating. Like Lois said, the default has been sprawl, and one of the things that we can do in communities is break down barriers for what they call the missing middle, which is in certain neighborhoods, if there's an open lot, you can build a smaller unit or 2 units on a single lot. And what that does is it creates diverse housing pricing in communities. And some people get concerned that it will impact their home value, but it actually makes their home value the expensive one on the lot if they have the big home. So there's a lot of myths. We talked at my last one on climate, how important education is in all of this. And I'll say education is so important on this because you can't, running a campaign on walkable communities and things like that, a lot of people don't have the visual of what that means, but they certainly love walking down the street to their local sandwich shop or walking downtown. So, but they don't immediately see how asking for that in their city general plan and their lifestyles can be made that way too if they're living in an area that isn't walkable. So I would, I love the idea of a 5-minute walk for every person in Petaluma as a general plan goal. And if we can try and do that, there's a lot of great examples of, what that enables when, from a creative land use standpoint, if you say we have a policy where we want everybody to have a 5-minute walk to get basic goods, that opens the door for a lot of interesting different types of land use and breaks down barriers from, people feeling like this is the only thing that can go there. So those are some of my thoughts. I certainly think that, especially with climate change and where we're at with climate change, there's a huge need to think about retrofitting sprawl in general and creating communities that can, be supported by bicycle. It's such an opportunity. Electric bikes are here. Electric bikes could be the thing that absolutely revolutionizes our transportation system. They're a fraction of the size. You can go 25 miles, 30 miles on them. They go 20 miles an hour. 70% of the trips in Petaluma are under 5 miles and they stay in Petaluma. That's a huge opportunity for us to convert people from driving their cars to riding their bikes or riding electric bikes and things like that. But going back to that $180 million in deferred maintenance, we can't have people riding their bikes around here. We can't have electric bikes with roads that are the worst in the Bay Area, or people are going to, we're going to have, we're going to have real problems. And I don't even want to say what will happen. But that's why, for me, the street safety, whether it's filling the potholes or the cracks in your sidewalk or making sure that we've got really safe bike lanes all around the city is so important because it just impacts quality of life for everyone. Everyone it does. I know we talk about traffic, we talk about potholes, but increasingly we're going to be, fearing for our lives. So.
With that, I am going to sign off. Thank you guys so much. Go Petaluma.
Thank you, Lois.
Thank
We
you,
really
Lois.
do.
Thanks,
care. Thank you
Lois.
so much for joining us. Nice round of applause, virtual round of applause for Lois.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Well, as we transition, it's time to transition into your questions and answers. And so we have about 10 questions been submitted so far. We have about 20 minutes remaining, so we should have time to get to all of those, but please don't hesitate to go ahead and post some more should you like, or should you hear something that conjures up another idea. Comments are welcome as well, not just questions. And I'll be sure to forward them on to Brian for him to follow up after this session as well.
Yeah.
So starting from the top, and I can go ahead and call the person's name based on in the order that they were received, and you're welcome to unmute yourself to go ahead and ask your question. If you don't unmute, I don't hear anything, I'll go ahead and ask the question on your behalf if that's more comfortable for you. Okay. So I'm going to start with the first question that we received, which was by Janice Cater Thompson. So Janice, did you want to ask your question? I think she's looking.
No, I think Lois answered that question. It was about Deer Creek Village, about her design was mixed use, and then the council went in the opposite direction, and now they're looking at doing a mixed use. So I think she answered the question. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, important question. Thank you. Next is Allison. Allison Talbot Jones has a question about rent control. Allison, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm a renter. I've had my rent raised many times. It's a constant fear that I have that I'm going to get the next thing in the mail that makes it go up again. And I just was wondering if rent control was a possibility here in Petaluma.
Great question,
Janice
Allison.
wanted to speak to that first. Janice,
Janice, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the next, robust renter protections was the next thing on my list. I didn't read everything on my list, but it is a possibility in concept. You'd have to have the political will to do that. But times are strange and different right now, so maybe it exists. And short of rent control, there are also other measures that are less objectionable in terms of the landlords. They might not care for them, but they could probably live with them. Those would include things like the landlord having to pay for move-out expenses and first month's rent at the next place, that kind of thing. And there's a range of protections up to rent control.
Yeah. I'll chime in too. To be honest, Allie, rent control, from what I've read, is a very, very complicated policy. I think it needs to be handled delicately because it can have negative effects as well. One of the areas where I'm absolutely gung-ho on rent control is around improvements. As a renter, as you know, I'm a renter as well, and 3 out of the last 4 places I've lived have had gas stoves, and they don't have properly functioning fan hoods. And when that happens, every time that I cook a meal, I'm putting toxic levels of emissions into my home. And for those of us with kids, it impacts their developing respiratory system. And it's really no wonder that we have 1 in 7 children are missing school due to asthma. So a renter should absolutely not be concerned about going and trying to advocate and ask for clean air in their home, mold reduction, things like that. So in those ways, I'm absolutely pro rent control. When it comes to capping rent increases, I think that there's certain cost of living things that we should absolutely be doing, and I'm all for a temporary moratorium on rent increases right now, for sure. I think that anyone who's increasing rent right now, which I've heard of it actually, is pretty heartless. So, good question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and it just kind of speaks to how development really is. It's a social justice issue as well. So yeah, thank you for speaking to that. The next question we have is from Ron Chestnut. This is in regard to low-income housing requirements and development. So Ron, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. One of the things, if you drive down Petaluma Hill Boulevard towards Santa Rosa, you see behind Cotati and behind Rohnert Park, you see large sprawls of McMansions being built. And when I've looked into this, it seems that many developers buy their way out of satisfying the requirement for having some more affordable housing.
Yeah.
So how does one deal with that?
Well, in Petaluma, we have an inclusionary housing ordinance that requires the developer, if they're building a property, to include at least 15 of the units be dedicated affordable housing. With city council approval, they can pay what's called an in lieu fee, and that allows them to get around that. And the problem with that, you know, in some ways they say, well, we're taking the money for other projects, but the problem is we don't get the housing. We don't need the money, we need the housing. And in particular, you know, that's a city council decision. They can reject it. There's no right there. So right now there's projects coming in, and the city council is allowing the developers to pay the in lieu fees, and that's, in some cases it might be a good thing, and in some cases it's a terrible thing. Like the one that really irks me was they allowed the developer to pay the in lieu fees on the downtown smart station project and push the affordable housing out to the far south edge of town. And that is that's environmental justice issues. That's what redlining looks like. Those are really just bad policies. It's old world thinking, and you know, it certainly wouldn't happen if I was on the council. I would never vote for it. That's for sure. And I would advocate that all the council members that I work with not do it as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, Janice.
So the city council could amend its ordinance to either remove the discretion to do the buyout, or they could equalize the in lieu fee to be monetarily equivalent to the actual building of that affordable unit. So it doesn't have to be the way it is.
Yeah. I think, as Kevin McDonald said, it's the floor, it's not the ceiling. It's not, you know, we passed it and it's a good first step, but it's not the end all be all. We can't build market rate housing to hit our affordable housing goals. We need different solutions. We can't rely on market rate development to fill our affordable needs. That's you know, we're going to eat up way too much land. We're going to eat up, you know, right now we're at the end of our arena cycle, or we're coming up on it, and we are out of land, even though we've missed our affordable housing targets because we've built, or we're on pace to build 816% of our market rate housing. We don't have land left. So we're going to have to look at rezoning in the next general plan, in the next RHNA cycle, regional housing needs assessment cycle too, to achieve those targets. And not hitting them is really a risk too, because the state continues to threaten that if you don't achieve your affordable housing goals, we'll come in and we'll take over and you'll lose local land use authority. I don't think anyone wants the state to be making decisions about what happens here. And so we need to take that seriously and come up with new creative solutions and get this stuff done.
Well, thanks. I am the foreperson of the civil grand jury, and I've been watching a whole bunch of stuff happen at county and city level. And what you just said is very true, that if you don't do it right, somebody else will step in and take your authority away.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Yep.
All right, next one is a question from Taryn. Taryn, are you with us? I think you had a question, it might be related to zoning, but it's about height limits. Okay, I can ask the question on their behalf. What about height limits per sun access and hill views or sense of place? Don't know if.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thoughts about that?
Sure. Height limits. I think a lot of this again goes towards the education piece. You know, we didn't have tall buildings in our downtown before we had the theater district. And when I think back on my growing up here in the early 90s, it was a very different place. Anyone who's been here for 20 or 30 years has seen Petaluma change. The key is how is it going to change? It's going to change again, you know, over the next 30 years, it's going to change. How is it going to change? And having a couple of 6-story buildings is not going to change who we are, in my mind. Eating up all the green fields that are at the south end of town and going across Freitas Road and developing all that land, or chewing up the farms at the base of Sonoma Mountain with more single-family homes. That's what's going to, you know, take away the character for me. That's what defines Petaluma and makes me excited about living here. So if a couple of tall buildings, you know, one tall building is not going to change it. Maybe 20 will, but that's going to happen over 30 years. And, you know, 30 years from now, if we still have our farms and we still have our river and we can get out and go for a kayak, or we can, you know, we can get local produce and local milk, I think we're going to be happy.
Thank you. The next question was from Teddy, I believe. Let me pull up that question. This is going back to the Corona Station and affordable housing. Teddy, are you with us still?
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah, I was wondering, it just seemed like with a little bit of public participation, it appears that Corona Station's going to become 100% affordable housing. We'll see if that actually does happen or not. But I'm wondering, is that a good example of what could happen here? Is it just, we just need to push a little bit harder? I mean, what happened there that might be a useful lesson to other development projects that are in the pipeline and will be in the pipeline in the near future? Good
question. I do think that negotiation is important, and knowing what you'll give and when you need to walk away. I've negotiated a lot of partnerships in the private sector, some with the public sector, and knowing when you walk away is, you know, you're only as strong as your ability to walk away in any negotiation. And so I've walked away from a lot of partnerships because they don't make sense. In the case of the Corona project and what happened there, the developer that's purchasing the land is really fluent with the state's affordable housing programs. And I called him and talked to him, and he's, you know, I mentioned the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program, the Transit-Oriented Development program, the infill infrastructure program, and he said, yeah, we're applying for all of those. And the whole time going through the process on the city approval, they were saying, no, we're not, we don't qualify for those. And I knew it was not true, but it was really, you know, it was a matter of having a developer who is knowledgeable about those things and knows how to go after them. And that was something Janice said of looking at our public lands, but we can actually do it with private developers too. And if we are able to staff up in our housing department with a really solid grant writer, and you pair a really competent grant writer with a private developer when they come in, you can say, I see your project that you're coming to us with. We'd actually like to help you get $10 million and add these other pieces into it because they help us. And one thing that I found in working with the public sector and the private sector, if you want to make money together, it's a good place to start a partnership. If there's money to be made, if I can help you make your profit margins and you can help me hit my affordable housing goals, that's a recipe for a good relationship. And if we staff up in our housing department, you know, we can provide that type of partnership. That's what I did in my prior job was do grant writing with local governments and private companies to help make projects come to life like that. So it's very possible. And I think we could be doing it right now. I don't know, Janice, anything else to add to that? I think that was a pretty specific question. You're on mute. Okay.
Now I agree. That was a good statement.
Yeah. All right, Vanessa, next
Uh,
question.
Yes, next question. It's from Elaine. So Elaine, I don't know if you're with us, but she has a question about the potential downtown flood zone and Rainier. Elaine, are you still with us?
I think I can see her over
I
here.
think I see them trying to. Hi there.
Yep,
I
we can see you.
Okay. I'm going to give it, let's see here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read their question or comment.
Okay.
With 2,000 units already planned for within a half a mile of the Petaluma River, compound traffic and unaffordable housing, where are we failing in this potential downtown flood zone to take care of our existing future traffic problems, especially as everything is focused on D Street as a strangle of traffic problems which are unsolved by Rainier? By Rainier? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty strong.
That is a really intricate question. Where are we struggling? Where are we falling
I
down?
think that are you with us, Elaine?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay. What's happening is that with the on-ramp to 101 moving farther south, that puts a larger number of people turning to D Street to get onto the freeway. And with the dredging of the river, the bridge is going to be opening more, and that's going to be impeding and traffic. Then you have more smart traffic blocking D Street, and you have a stranglehold on that situation. And excuse me for saying unaffordable housing. What I mean is that which is not affordable housing.
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, well,
I love our downtown and I want to support our downtown, but I see this as being a kind of like oh gosh, these trains are running on the opposite directions on the same track.
yeah, no, that very, very astute comment. I understand now what you're talking about. The reality is there's no magic bullet for the traffic that's in that area. We've got a train that comes through our city. We've got Highway 101. We've got the river. And as you mentioned, the bridge is going to be coming up. So there's no magic bullet for solving that issue. I do think the Caulfield Bridge, going back to one of my solutions, I think the Caulfield Bridge is a good example of something that might help because you're pulling the traffic that's coming down Lakeville and you're giving them a second way to get over. And I lived in Portland for 3.5 years, and they've got 7 bridges, and you kind of learn which ones are good at certain times. You learn if you see one of them that's up, there's a couple of bridges that were drawbridges. If they were blocked or something like that, you can go to a different one. So you give people choices of how to get across there. That's certainly one way that we can start to address that. But yeah, there's no magic bullet for what's going on there. We need to, we're going to need to grit and bear it because anyone who says that they have the solution to the traffic issues in that area of town is not being truthful. There's no solution. There's only things that can do a little bit of relief, but you're not talking about major relief here. We're not going from 80 seconds of delay to 20 seconds of delay. We're going from 80 to 60 maybe. And it's
Thank you for your new vision.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the authenticity too and the honesty, Brian. We are just about to close up. We have one final question, so I think it's just good to try get this one in before we say good night. So the final question is from Rob in regard to sprawl and the UGB.
Yeah,
Rob,
I saw one of your charts showing that with sprawl, the further out you go, the more money the city loses, and downtown you make money. So is there a way to charge for services and police and fire and new roads out there, so we don't build them, so we don't not encourage sprawl.
Yeah. Our impact fees are one way that we can do that. Our impact fees are how we recoup the costs of development. And right now, there's not a locational component to our impact fees that I'm aware of. So I am a huge fan of adding fees for impacts associated with transportation, because it's completely out of whack right now. The fact that you can be building somewhere where someone drives, maybe a half a mile a day, and someone who drives 10 miles a day, and they're paying the same exact impact fees, but their road, they're taxing our roads, they're all of that. That's a huge issue. So I'm a big fan of making it more costly to build in those areas where it just is more costly to maintain. As a business person, I couldn't survive if that was my business model. We're lucky that we can go back to the voters and ask them for a tax, although it's unfortunate we're doing it in a year like this where so many people are struggling. But as a business, if we ran our business like this, we'd be out of business. You got to be efficient.
Thank you all so much for joining us. We hope that you were able to get some more information. I certainly have learned a lot. I really want to say thank you again. Virtual applause to Janice and Lois. Janice, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really, really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom and your expertise with us. Just a final reminder, visit brianbarnacle.com. Sign up for yard sign. If you have a yard sign, can I get a clap? Maybe a clap, virtual clap, Zoom clap. Awesome. If you still need your sign, go to brianbarnacle.com. We'll make sure you get one. You can also sign up to volunteer to make sure other people get their signs or get their swag, their BB swag. And of course, we're always accepting donations. So if you haven't donated yet, you can do so at brianbarnacle.com. We hope to see you all again in 2 weeks from tonight, which will be Wednesday, September 16th. And so more information for that is forthcoming, and look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you all so much. Look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks, if not before then. Stay well and take care of one another.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.